Okay, welcome and thank you for attending this session on the Australian study of infants on a low-dose growth hormone treatment, which is done in the collaboration with the heads of 8 national PWS clinics. The aim of this study was to assess the benefits and the safety of a relatively low-dose growth hormone treatment of 4.5 milligram per m squared per week in very young children with PWS, and to compare the response of infants versus toddlers because they are in different nutritional phases. In PWS, children start generally growth hormone treatment at an increasingly younger age, following the introduction of the PWS indication in 2009. There is a lack of published data, however, on growth hormone treatment in infants which are aged under 1 year of age. The response to a dose of 7 milligram per m squared per week is well documented and recommended for PWS following the consensus guidelines in the workshop on the growth hormone treatment in PWS, as Paul just spoke about. Whereas a dose of 2.1 milligram per week is considered ineffective, as he has also just shown in the study by Carroll in 2002. And sadly to say, it is still the only dose comparison study to date. Why infants versus toddlers? Data on infants have generally been combined with older children in previous studies, mainly because of very low numbers. However, young children with PWS go through several very distinct nutritional phases. Infants are typically hypertonic and in a failure to thrive phase from birth to a medium of 9 months, whereas toddlers are in a difficulty of no feed, in a no difficulty feeding stage with appropriate growth, is a medium from 9 to 25 months. This is generally followed by an increase in weight without an increase in appetite before the increase in appetite starts off, which may lead to hyperphagia. This is from Miller, who studied that recently, and most of you may be aware of this. And consequently, we have been asked to direct our research to actually reflect these nutritional phases, which are so important in Prader-Willi syndrome. The participants were young children from the PWS OSGRO database, and who started growth hormone treatment before 24 months, and who had at least 2 years of data. The analysis was of the height, weight, and BMI, body mass index, which is a measure of weight over height squared, using the World Health Organization standards, which are recently being recommended to use for young children, and the Prader-Willi syndrome specific reference standards, which allow us to compare individuals of different age and gender, as explained by Paul as well. I would like to add that the World Health Organization standards are actually based on breastfed children, and as a consequence, they are sort of a little bit lighter than bottle-fed milk fed children that are used in the general previously used standards, the USA 2000 standards. We looked at the insulin growth factor, IGF-1, at spinal curvature, tone and development, and sleep and breathing problems. The results. The birth characteristics of the 56 children studies is presented below in the bar graph, with the frequency and the number of children and the age at which they started, which was between 2 and 24 months, and this includes data of children that had privately purchased growth hormone, because in Australia they generally don't start until they're 6 months of age on growth hormone treatment. Preterm children are presented in green, and 25% were born premature, which is between 30 and 37 weeks. 52% were boys and 48% were girls, and we found no difference in the response to growth hormone treatment between the boys and the girls. Of those that had a genetic subtype, 47% had deletion, 51% maternal uniparental disomy, and 2% imprinting. The height or length, if they were under 2 years of age, at the start of growth hormone is presented in the box plots, with the boxes representing the medium and 50% of the data, and the whiskers the range of data. The toddlers had generally a greater shortfall in height than the infants, compared to the normal, the average as indicated by the 0 standard deviation line, which is sort of the average of the population. And we found that especially toddlers with UPD were rather short. Thus you needed less catch-up growth when you started growth hormone earlier. Height increased with catch-up growth in both groups over the treatment period, and is indicated here as the mean and standard deviation scores and the confidence interval, which is again this sort of range of 95%. The infants in blue actually fully caught up in height with the kids of the same age after 2 years of treatments. However, after 3 years of treatments, the toddlers had also caught up in height, and this sort of trend continues. So, you know, they will catch up even if they start at age 8 or 9, but it might just take a bit longer. The infants are between 2 and 12 months, and the toddlers are 13 to 24 months when they started growth hormone treatment. The body mass index using the World Health Organization standards in infants was below normal at the baseline, and that's consistent with the failure to thrive phase in infants. However, the toddlers were already in a normal range for their BMI. The BMI increased in both groups over the treatment period, and that's using the normal standards. And after 2 years, we found that some of the children at 3 or 4 years of age actually had put on quite a bit of weight for their height compared to their height. However, when we used the BMI standards using the specific PWS specific reference standards, we found that they actually had decreased compared to children not on growth hormone. And in this case, because we use PWS specific reference standards, we don't find a difference between infants and toddlers, and therefore the data have been combined. It's very important that growth hormone has benefits, but again, food intake needs to be closely monitored, also in the toddler, especially because as weight increases, even before the appetite may increase. And exercise always needs to be encouraged to build the muscles for strength and stamina, and also to burn the calories. We found no significant difference in the height or BMI response with growth hormone treatment between the children born preterm or full term when you take the age at start of growth hormone treatment into account. There was also no significant difference in height or BMI response with growth hormone treatment between the children with deletion or UPD when taking the age at start of treatment into account. Why evaluate the IGF-1 response, which is used as an indication of the effectiveness of growth hormone? Well, in PWS there's generally good response with increase in IGF-1, and the increase is generally well above the recommended reference range for most children with PWS when treated with the growth hormone dose of 7 mg per m squared per week, which is the recommended dose according to the guidelines and generally used around the world. And because of the long-term effect of a very high IGF-1 values is unknown, especially when you're looking at very young children starting them. We found that at the start of growth hormone treatment, all the IGF-1 values were either below the reference range in 78% or in the lower half of normal. And with treatment of 4.5 milligrams, which is right in the middle between the very lowest dose and the middle dose used in the Carroll study, that the values increased to either within the reference range in 50 to 80% or were slightly above. And this overall may lower the potential risk of long-term treatment. At baseline, all children were hypertonic, 61% mildly so, and all children were developmentally delayed, and about 72% mildly so. The improvements observed were especially in those moderately and severely affected at baseline, but even after several years, they're all still mildly hypotonic and mildly developmentally delayed. At baseline, no spinal curvature was noted in the 94% of children that actually started growth hormone treatment. 2 with a mild curve improved with growth hormone treatment, and 1 with a moderate curve progressed to a brace. 3 developed curves in the second year, 2 were mild, and 1 also progressed to a brace. Sleep studies have been mandatory since 2009, but have not always been done on the children starting growth hormone prior to that date. 17 of the 66 children had sleep-related disordered breathing, either mild central or obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA called in short. Several had adenoid tonsillectomy prior to growth hormone start, and 5 of 8 continued on CPAP, or continuous positive airway pressure, and 1 continued on a nasal spray for this. Evaluation of sleep and breathing after initiation of growth hormone treatment, which was done generally around 6 weeks after starting, and then sort of either every year depending on how well they are. 5 had no OSA, 1 actually improved substantially, but 7 worsened, and 5 had no OSA prior to starting growth hormone. 1 had a reasonable control prior to starting growth hormone treatment, but all 6 recommenced growth hormone again within 3 to 12 months after they had adjusted the CPAP machine or had some tonsillectomy done. 1 had mild central and OSA prior to initiation of growth hormone treatment and developed severe OSA and ceased at 3 months and had not stabilized after 1 year. In summary, the Australian cohort study showed that treating infants and toddlers with 4.5 milligram was sufficient to normalize and keep the height standard deviation scores in a normal range, the PWS specific BMI standard deviation scores in a negative range that was also long-term over several years, and the IGF-1 values within the reference range or slightly above. So both giving the benefits as well as lowering the risk of any side of long-term effects. Starting earlier, such as in infants, had benefits in normalizing height and BMI in the first year, and the risk of respiratory events and spinal curvature was minimized by regular monitoring and treatment. Further research and follow-up is warranted to address whether the dose is sufficient to also improve fat to lean mass ratio and bone density, because we do give a bit less than anywhere else, the muscle tone and strength, and we have developed standardized measures for PWS that could be used, but a bit more time consuming. Physical and mental development also with standardized measures and the developmental milestones. Furthermore, evaluate the effect of a low dose treatment on spinal curvature. Thus, early introduction has a beneficial effect, as a large USA demographic study suggested. And should growth hormone dosing be individualized to maintain the IGF-1 within the recommended reference range? Our thanks to Pfizer for supporting the PWS component with a part-time investigator-initiated research grant, which was extended, and APAC for supporting OSCRO, all co-investigators and the OSCRO team, and all the growth hormone coordinators and other health professionals and clinic assistants. Thank you very much.